You stepped into a CEO role 6 months pregnant.
Yes, that absolutely did happen. You've just got to find ways of thinking through what impact am I creating and how do I help people see it? Wanting to be promoted for promotion's sake versus there being a business reason why that promotion should exist. You have to try and grow the business, i.e., you have to deliver more, because if the business is delivering more, then they can afford to pay more.
Katie Streeter Hurle is the CEO of SMG, the commerce media specialist powering 7+ retail media networks. Katie redefined what leadership looks like, stepping into a CEO role 6 months pregnant. From driving SMG's rise from startup to market leader, Katie brings a unique full-funnel perspective, blending creative thinking and precision planning. Katie, thank you so much for joining me. I have been looking forward to our chat all weekend.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Lucy.
So I am going to jump straight into it. You started your career at P&G client side, and you're now the CEO of SMG. Inspirational. How did you break into media, and was it intentional? Have you always wanted to work in this industry?
So I should be very honest. No, I don't think it was really, really intentional or part of a kind of really clear plan. I think when I kind of left education, I was thinking to myself, well, what types of things would really interest me? And I knew that I would love to do something that was kind of surrounded by people. And I knew that doing something that was kind of part creative felt really appealing to me. So when I first joined P&G, I actually started in a function called shopper marketing, which was essentially P&G working with key retailers to help them kind of build co-marketing programs and activations. And back then it was very much seen as a bit of a sort of side discipline or a kind of secondary marketing function. But actually over the last few years, that's really changed a lot. And so it turns out, well, that was an amazing place to kind of start my career in an organization like P&G, because I got to work across their full brand portfolio. So with brands like Gillette or Fairy, Pantene. And I also got to work with big retailers, which was an amazing experience, because obviously if you're a consumer goods company, the reality is that you sell all of your stuff through other people. And so understanding how retail worked was really important. But honestly, for me, what I loved straight away about that job was the kind of planning side of things. So figuring out who the audience was, what to say, how to reach them. And I think that's really what led me to the kind of more media part of my career. And honestly, that's still the part that really excites me today as well.
So from P&G to SMG, what would you say the main difference is in terms of, I mean, I know you're a CEO now, so we can't really compare the job role, but what would you say the main differences are being at P&G and SMG?
So obviously Procter Gamble is a huge multinational corporation. So you learn a huge amount, I think, from how to navigate your way through really big companies when working somewhere like that. So understanding the structures of big companies, understanding how decisions get made, how budgets get allocated, how performance is tracked. Those are all brilliant, brilliant things to have. And typically what I see is in client side roles, you get a load of depth. So you end up becoming a kind of subject matter expert, maybe in, the grooming category or in laundry, or in kind of P&G's case. So you get huge amounts of depth. Whereas actually agency side, what you get is huge amounts of breadth. So, literally for me, one minute I might have been working on a campaign for Nike, and then I was working on a campaign for Samsung, and then I was working on a campaign perhaps for a cheese brand or something like that. You end up with huge breadth and variety. And so what you end up with is kind of specialism in a very, very different way. I also think, I went from kind of huge corporation to startup and now kind of scale up. And so what's needed is incredibly different. And you learn it again a huge amount from being in that environment. So when I joined the business, there was no IT function. So, the internet breaks and well, you have to crawl in the cupboard and plug it back in. And you have to kind of figure out how to do a lot of things yourself. And so I actually think working for a small growing business makes you really, really resourceful. And agencies on top of that are incredibly fast paced. So not only are you resourceful, you're doing it at kind of breakneck speed. And so for me, they were very, very different types of experience, but equally valuable. And I've definitely taken, my understanding of big companies and big corporates and how they work into helping clients. And vice versa. That's been really useful to have perspective on both sides, I think.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I understand the struggle. I've worked at both startups and big corporations, and the number of hats you have to wear. One minute you could be the marketing function, then you're sales, then you're supporting products. So yeah, I completely understand. Now, one thing I'd love to ask is there something you can tell us that we can't tell from your LinkedIn profile or your CV? Who is the Katie behind the CEO title?
Um, yeah, I guess trying to work out what's an interesting thing to say on this one. But maybe the thing that is worth sharing is I'm very, very introverted. So I think maybe there's a kind of expectation or a notion that if you're in a kind of leadership role, maybe you typically to more towards a more extroverted profile and personality type. But I'm the complete opposite of that. We do kind of insights profiles within the business. I'm quite a strong blue, which means I'm quite kind of analytical, reflective, quite calm. And I think sometimes people think that maybe those two things don't go together. I think my perspective on that is I kind of think that quiet leadership, as much as you can be on and you can talk to people and you can be very communicative and confident, quiet leadership is really important. It means kind of listening and spending time observing and being thoughtful and taking time to kind of figure out the right thing to do. I don't think you have to be the noisiest voice to be really effective in your role. And so I think sometimes kind of quiet or more introverted leadership is a little bit underrated. So maybe that's something to say that people wouldn't traditionally expect from someone doing a job like the one I'm doing.
I think you've raised a very important point there, because the CEO job title or the CEO job description doesn't say that this person has to be stage ready, has to be a great performer, has to be able to engage large groups of people. That's not part of the role. But often people mix that stereotype with the person has to be an extrovert. This CEO has to be able to speak to large groups of people. And not that you can't, but it's not necessary. It doesn't mean that you're less effective in the role by being an introvert. And I love that you've shared that, because I do think there is a stereotype that CEOs are extroverts, and that's not the case. I mean, you've explained to us that's actually not the case.
Yeah, I also think as well, there's different ways of doing the same thing, right? Like some people are amazing at like whipping up a crowd and maybe they're like, getting people to chant and stuff, I can't imagine anything worse than trying to do something like that. It would actually kill me. But equally, can I explain to a group of people the vision, where we're heading? Can I help them understand it? Can I make it simple? Yes, I can do those things.
Yeah.
And so my way of doing some of those things might be a little bit different. I still see it as part of the job to be visible, to talk to people, but I think you can do that in lots of different ways. I think for a very long time I thought, well, you have to be a certain kind of character to do something like that. I'm not sure that's totally true. There's lots of different ways of doing the same job, and none of them necessarily better or worse than the other.
Thank you for sharing. So, my next question, and I would say that I'm the most excited about asking you this question. So, you stepped into a CEO role 6 months pregnant.
Mhm.
Now, I just want to repeat that just in case anyone didn't hear. Katie stepped into a CEO role 6 months pregnant. Now, first of all, congratulations. I wish there were more stories like this. I wish this was the norm. Unfortunately, it's not, but you are living proof that it's possible. And I guess I would like to know how this position came about. What were you thinking? Were there any doubts? And if you feel comfortable, just talk us through that a little bit.
Course. So, yes, that absolutely did happen, and not that long ago. So, my boss, who was the boss of SMG, was actually made the CEO of our parent company. So he got the opportunity to step into a really big kind of role, looking after the total group of businesses that own SMG. And so I was asked if I would kind of step into his shoes. And I definitely thought about the timing, like it's definitely been an interesting time to kind of take on a job like this, because of course you come into it and then you're also planning your kind of temporary exit from it almost immediately, which is a very unusual dynamic for kind of taking on a new role, and it's definitely been a whirlwind. But I also just kept thinking to myself, I don't think there's ever a perfect time for something like that. And equally, a business that has a singular dependency on one person isn't that strong of a business. You need to have a business that can operate, with multiple people playing roles, and of which you have a really strong leadership team, which SMD does. And so I don't think you should ever be aiming to have a company that is kind of dependent on one person. And I think what made me kind of say yes and feel good about taking on the role was one, I genuinely do think I can play a role in helping to shape SMG's future. Like, I've been here for a long time. I've worked here for 14 years. I've done lots of different kinds of jobs, from sort of commercial and client servicing jobs to job setting up specialist functions. I was our COO, I've been the CSO. So it kind of felt like another step, building on the experience that I had. But also, I felt really passionate about showing that leadership can look a bit different. And honestly, that second part is really important to me. I already have a daughter at home. I already work 4 days a week. I already need certain kinds of flexibility to make my job work. And I really feel strongly about making that possible for other people in the business too. And so, yes, yeah, it might look a little bit different with me doing that job. And equally as well, I might step out for a period of time. But again, I don't think there's a kind of manual that says this is exactly what the CEO job should look like. There's lots of different ways you can write some of that for yourself. So I felt like it was a good opportunity to try and do that.
I love your story because I joined my company 7 months pregnant at the time. And I also work a 4-day week. I work full-time hours in 4 days because I have a daughter at home. And you are the symbol that shows that this setup doesn't only just work at my level, that you can actually be C-suite and craft an environment that allows you to thrive. And I think it's so inspirational, but also for me, motivational to know that these allowances can be made in order for you to get the job done. I think it's fantastic. And SMG should also be commended because it's not the norm. I wish it would be the norm, but it's not. And they showcase progression. They showcase how we should be operating as businesses.
I totally agree. And I also think businesses talk about wanting experienced, committed talent that is really, really valuable. And the reality is that people have lives outside of work as well as professional careers. And I think it's incredibly short-sighted when businesses kind of assume that maybe people who have responsibilities outside of work can't play that role as being hugely valuable leaders within a business. And I think they're mad to kind of let those people go, right? Because those people will go to places where a degree of flexibility and trust is possible, and there are companies that will offer it. And I genuinely think that's a massive competitive advantage that companies sometimes don't even think about. They just forget about that. And, I'm not the only example of this at SMG. We have many women in the business in leadership positions, often working on reduced working schedules, often with absolutely mad amounts of responsibility outside of work. And they make it work. And the way that we make it work from our side is we lean in, they lean in, and we find a way to make it all stack up. And if you do it based on trust, then again, it's absolutely possible.
And just thank you for showcasing what's possible because there aren't enough examples of it. So thank you. So this moves me on to my next question. The CEO stereotype is still typically very male, very always on. And I would like you to take us back to a time where you have deliberately tried to shatter that mold.
I mean, my example on this, honestly, Lucy, is so simple. And I don't know if it's inspirational in any way, shape, or form or not, but I was really clear when I came back from my first maternity leave that I wanted to find a way of making 4 days a week actually work. So obviously for many people, the reality is that they work 4 days a week, but actually it's kind of, they're trying to fit in 5 days in 4. They're taking a 20% cut in their salary in order to do that, but they're working far, far beyond that. I understand, of course, there's times where it's not going to be at exactly 80%, like hardly any job. The reality is that you're working at exactly the kind of contracted hours that you've had. But I also think there's no point in signing up to something that just is kind of set up for you to fail.
Yeah.
It was very clear when I came back from my first maternity leave over how I planned to make it work and some of the boundaries that I wanted to set. And for me, I don't work on a Wednesday. That's absolutely non-negotiable. Yes, fine. If we've got a big event a couple of times a year, if there's a huge client meeting, of course, I will move my schedule and I will make it work. But that Wednesday is my non-working day. So on that day, I'm not there checking emails all the time. I'm not there taking client phone calls. I'm not there trying to set my daughter up, to do something while I'm trying to speak to a client. It doesn't work. I can't do both of those things at the same time. And so I was very clear about how I needed to kind of protect some boundaries around that day, because also just thinking it was right for the company. Like, I'm not going to do a great job whilst I'm running after a 3-year-old in the park. I can't have a sensible conversation at that point in time. And so I think I was good, I think, at doing that. And then also we did a piece of work off the back of that internally that said, okay, how do we properly design jobs for reduced working schedules? Because a lot of people just sort of basically don't do that piece of work. They just say, great, we've got someone back on 4 days, just like fit it all in. Now, there's 20% of that work that probably needs to either not happen, or it needs to sit somewhere else in the business, but there needs to be an actual piece of job design that needs to happen to make that work. And so we were quite, again, intentional about helping people as they were entering into reduced working schedules for the first time, set them up for success and design jobs that were actually going to work, and design goals and things that were appropriate for the amount of time that someone had in the business. And so those two things sound so simple, but I think in practice, those are things that just don't happen that frequently. And so, yeah, they might not be the most inspirational, but I think it's hopefully just reassurance, perhaps for other people, that you can have those types of conversations, and they are important conversations to have. And they're not about being inflexible. They're just about designing something that sets you up to succeed.
I would argue with you. I think that is quite inspirational. I mean, it might be because I'm in a very similar situation and I'm a woman, I have a child, and I think these things matter massively to me. So I wouldn't downplay what you've done there. You've essentially redesigned the workplace to fit a whole, sometimes overlooked demographic at that level. So I think it's inspirational, and thank you for sharing with us. Okay, so I would like you to think back to a time where you had to fight for pay or progression. Now, if you can you explain to us what happened and what you learned from that experience?
So I'm gonna swerve the question a tiny bit, because I thought back to the thing, and I don't think I have. I don't think I have fought for pay or progression. And as I was thinking about it, I was thinking to myself, oh, was that a mistake? Should I be doing this, and should I have done that for a little bit longer? And yeah, should I have got kind of cracking on that a bit sooner? Or actually, have I been very lucky and fortunate to work in environments where you haven't had to? And I think it's probably somewhere in the middle of those two. I think I genuinely have worked in two companies where they have been very, very good at recognizing performance and rewarding people appropriately and fairly. And that's been amazing. I think the other piece that I perhaps have always done, which I think is really important, thinking about kind of salary and how to get rewarded and how to get kind of promoted over time, is I think I've always focused on business impact first. And I think if you're delivering well for the business and you find ways of helping people to see and understand the impact that you're having, and that doesn't mean being overly self-promotional. I think I'm probably the last person who would be doing some of that. But if you can help make your impact known and visible in an organization, then the pay and progression tends to follow. You've just got to find ways of thinking through, what impact am I creating and how do I help people see it? And I think sometimes you can trip up by focusing on the what it means for me part first, or you think through what it means for the business. I actually think thinking through what it means for the business first, and therefore what do I think I've kind of earned, is the most important thing. And so I think I've been lucky that I've worked in companies where, one, I have been set up to be able to make a good impact, and that has been kind of rewarded. But I think, two, I've always focused on that bit first. And if I've got that bit right, then the rest has kind of followed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I don't think people focus on what you've just mentioned as much nowadays. I think I deserve to be promoted. I've done X, Y, Z, and I feel I'm worthy of a pay rise or promotion, progression. And we lose sight that we're employed by businesses, and businesses need to operate, and there needs to be a return on investment. Like most things, it's a value exchange, and value exchange is so important. And walking into any discussion or any negotiation, you have to articulate clearly what the impact is for the other person, business, just the second party. And I think that's really valuable to share that, because I don't think people approach it like that.
And I think if you don't have that conversation, it's very easy to get into the wrong type of conversation with your employer, right? Which is this kind of feeling that someone is wanting to be promoted for promotion's sake versus there being a business reason why that promotion should exist in the business. Kind of, you have to make the case that says, why is this more senior role required? And therefore, why am I the right person to kind of fill that role? And I worked for a very long time for one of the co-founders of SMG, a guy called Joel Hopwood, who he used to do a presentation internally called How to Get Promoted and Get Paid More. And he always talks about there's kind of three things you have to do to kind of impact those things. The first thing you have to do is you have to try and grow the business, i.e. you have to deliver more, because if the business is delivering more, then they can afford to pay more. You have to make other people better. So you have to be able to build the performance of others beyond just yourself. And you have to be able to build capability in the business. So new ways of doing things, new innovations, etc. It's not just enough to say, I've grown it, but it's exactly the same. It's like, I've grown it and I've built something that will take it on a kind of a further step. And if you can do those three things, you're increasing your value to that business exponentially. And then, of course, there's a business case why you should get promoted or a pay rise over time. But I think thinking through your overall impact and the different ways that you can create impact for a company, then it's very easy to have a conversation about your kind of your role or your progression or your salary.
Thank you for sharing. If I could put those three pillars on a post-it note
Yeah.
and give them to every single person that has a discussion around, I want to be promoted, I deserve more, I think it would make people really reconsider, is now the right time? And like you mentioned, am I asking for a promotion for promotion's sake? The way our industry is set up, it's climb, keep climbing. What's the next thing? And that discussion needs to be had, even if it's with yourself. If I'm honest, just, the discussion needs to be had.
Yeah. And if you're going to go into a conversation with your manager or with HR, depending on where it kind of sits in your business, I think having thought through all of those things is far more powerful than saying, well, I put this amount of effort in,
Yeah.
or I've worked X number of hours. Like, no. What impact did you have? How did you help improve against those kind of metrics for a business? No, I totally agree. I mean, that's actually why in our business, Joel used to do that presentation, because I think it helped people feel really, really clear on what they needed to do. And then you help empower people to kind of say, oh, actually, no, I know exactly how to approach those conversations. And I understand the circumstances in which those conversations can and should be had.
Right. Impact over effort. I'm a big believer in that. So thanks again for sharing. So what's one belief about success that you had very early on in your career that you had to unlearn as a CEO?
I mean, I thought for a very, very, very long time that your job as you got more senior was to know all of the answers yourself and know them straight away. Honestly, I believe that. So I spent so much effort trying to acquire knowledge so that I knew all the answers to everything for every kind of situation and circumstance. And that is a complete fool's errand, right? It's completely impossible to be able to do that. And I figure now that kind of leadership is much more about being able to figure out the answers, not knowing them all, and of being able to do that through the people that you work with. The reality is that you will work with people who know far more in a certain subject area than you will ever dream of knowing. And so knowing when to use them as a kind of expert to help kind of give you some of the answers yourself, I think is very, very important. And then also knowing when to trust your gut. Like sometimes you won't have experience in something and that's okay. But you will have an instinct in something. And the longer you kind of work, the better those instincts, I think, hopefully get over time. And then you can trust some of those things without feeling that you have to have every single piece of information or the kind of answer in front of you. And so now I see leadership much more about kind of creating the right environment for those conversations and decisions to take place versus basically essentially acting as a kind of a hero or a single point in all of this. That's just impossible to do. So I think I've definitely kind of unlearned the concept that you have to know everything yourself.
Thank you. That the notion of trying to learn everything sounds exhausting. I can't like that. Yeah, I can relate, and it is exhausting when you can just let go of that pressure and knowing that have the right people on the bus, have a trusted circle of experts that you can go to for the right. Yeah, you can't do everything. So thank you for anyone here listening. You shouldn't be doing everything because then there's something wrong with that setup.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I completely agree.
So I would like to close out with the random round. So this is very quick fire questions. First answer that pops into your mind. Ready?
Yeah, ready.
Okay. So first thing you do when you wake up.
Have a coffee.
Perfect. What's your go-to hot drink?
Cappuccino.
Okay. Which emoji do you use the most?
Thumbs up. I'm a very lazy one now.
Um, one small thing that makes your day instantly feel better.
A really positive interaction with someone in the team.
Okay. If you had to give a TED talk for 20 minutes with no prep, what would the topic be?
Quiet leadership.
Nice. Okay. And final question. If you could only eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would that one meal be?
Or definitely something pasta based. Something with pasta and truffle. That sounds great. The rest
Oh,
of my life, I'm into that.
thank you for sharing. Now, Katie, honestly, this conversation has been selfishly very insightful for me, but I hope our listeners will find it as insightful as I have. You have been very transparent with us. Your insights have been so valuable. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me. You're doing an amazing job, Lucy, with this podcast. So thank you.
Thank you. If this episode made you think differently or questioned the way you have a conversation or the way you approach your strategy moving forward, please do me a favour. Hit like, subscribe and share. Your support will help others discover this podcast and keep the conversation going.